Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bayo here, coming to you with a 2022 US election postmortem. So, just to start off here, this wasn't a. Well, the best way to say this, my forecast wasn't particularly good. It wasn't bad per se in a couple of key metrics, but overall, not very satisfied. And there's a couple of things that I have discovered that I did wrong that definitely skewed the results of the model, which I'm going to get into here. And I will strongly note this is not an excuse for the results. This is an explanation for the results. This is an explanation of why the result was skewed, not me excusing the fact that my result was skewed. Keep that in mind. Because if I don't explain what happened and what I'm doing differently, then how can anyone trust that I'm actually taking the fact that I had a meaningful miss on seats? Popular vote, not too bad, but seat-wise, I didn't do particularly great, especially when you consider, like, not even just on an aggregate level, but on, like, individual seat levels. But we'll get into that. Then we're also going to get into the interpretations of this result, in my opinion. So just to start off with here. So I'm not comparing myself to anybody else for this particular time because there's not many other models that have the data in a way that's really nice and easy to compare against here. And I will note, for seat hit, normally I would compare district to district, how many districts I got correct, but my seat hit rate is pretty abysmal, so I'm not even going to bother. It's pretty low once you look at it, because this is the actual result map. And if we go, which one is this? This one. This was my final forecast map. I have 251, 184. So just on the face of it, I'm off by 40. I minimum incorrectly called 20 seats, but it's actually more because I incorrectly called Maine, second, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, a bunch in New York. I actually did New Jersey pretty well. A bunch in Pennsylvania, some in Ohio, a bunch in Michigan, a bunch in Illinois, etc. There's a bunch of wrong calls. They do go both sides of the aisle. I underestimated the Republicans in, say, Florida and New York, and I overestimated Republicans in, say, Illinois and Washington and New Hampshire and such. So I don't think it's necessarily accurate to say that my model is, the seat projection was inherently biased, but the popular vote number was a bit biased by accident, to be clear. So again, just going back to here, we're doing a slightly different measure for error here for seats. I'm not sure if this is a better way to measure seat error, but this is aggregate seat error. And you see, this isn't comparable to these numbers, by the way, because they're different things. So right here, bagel polling, that is the model I published on the November 6th. My Democrat best case scenario here was my model, the best case scenario for the Democrats as published on November 6th. And bagel polling star is amendments I have made, which I will get into here, actually. Before we do that, just to cover here. So overall, my mean squared error for popular vote isn't actually that bad. 3.6 is pretty acceptable. Now, that said, when you only have two parties, well, technically three with other, you're going to get, generally speaking, less error because it's harder to miss with two people. If that makes sense. It's much harder to skew your popular vote results with just two parties. But overall, 3.6 isn't terrible. When you look at my best case scenario, it's 1.29, which is pretty good. And it's actually a 0.25% or a quarter point once you adopt the changes I've adopted here. Wow. So again, I will stress here, most of the miss here was a calibration miss, which I'm going to get into in a moment. You break it down by subregions, so like the Northeast, I actually technically do worse with my adjustment, but that is what it is. Most of the regions, it does a lot better. And actually, the West, it's almost spot on. So that's kind of neat. Subregions are always also going to have a much higher error too, generally, than the national numbers, because you have national numbers, lots of polls for that. There's fewer polls for regions, and there's even fewer polls for districts or states. So the smaller and more specific you get, the more margin of error you're going to have, naturally. Seat-wise, I didn't do super hot here. If you look at, again, my main scenario, off by a bunch in the Northeast, off by a bunch in the Midwest, off by not too much in the South, honestly, and off by a lot in the West. So, overall, raw numbers, not great. So if we do the amended version, so this is what I have for the amended map, and as you can see here, it immediately looks better. Colorado's still crap because one of the reasons I had... So just to get into this now, there's really 4 main things on my end that I didn't do properly, I'm going to say. 3 of which are calibration, and 1 is just... this is what really hurts Colorado, specifically. And lesser extent, Illinois and Pennsylvania and North Carolina. My district demographic projection wasn't very good. So that was a big part of the issue here. And by that I mean how my model, or how I modeled the districts based off of counties and legislative districts wasn't particularly good. Now, why is that? Well, counties are not homogeneous, naturally, and even among the county itself, the population distribution isn't homogeneous. So a very small sliver of a county, if it's a city, might have a lot of people in it. So if you have a very small sliver in this district, that actually could have most people in that county. If you have notable stratification of different types of demographics in the U.S., this is very poignant. Let's say North Carolina, black voters tend to vote Democrat significantly higher than white voters. So if you have a county that has white voters on one half of the county and black voters on the other half, but you just naively assume it's homogenous, which is kind of what I did because I don't actually have more specific data, well, then you will assume you have a homogenous split there when actually it should be the black voters in one district and the whites are in another district. Though that's not really where it stops here. So we also have a big one, I might have mentioned this before, in Colorado, notably Colorado's 3rd district, where this quite comes up. Colorado's 3rd district, on the bottom right corner of it, is a city. I think it's part of Denver, not 100% certain. And that's where almost the entire district lives. So that would be best described as an urban district. But because of how my model, which is calibrated in Canada, assumes urbanicity to work, that doesn't work here. Because there's a lot of empty rural land added to Colorado's 3rd district, which causes it to, by my model's assignment and calculation terms, it says it is a rural riding because the population density is really low, but it's really low because there's a bunch of land where almost nobody lives in the district. Like, not even normal rural land, like almost empty rural land. Almost everyone lives in the bottom right corner of the district. So that is also one of my flaws in the district projections here and how my models interacted with them. I don't have any remedies directly for this level of projection right now. I think in the future I'm just going to have to hand label US districts if they're rural, suburban, or urban, because the gerrymandering of these districts means that there's no coherence to them at all. Like, you can't naively assume anything off of them. You have to manually investigate them. That is a fault of my end. I should have done that, but it was I didn't realize it because I wasn't thinking about it because it's not a problem in Canada, so it was not something in my mind to fix. With that, so there's a couple big tuning changes I did. So one of the ones I was mentioning a couple times during the campaign, I wasn't super thrilled about how my model was handling urbanicity in the sense that how do I use the data? Not how I've assigned it, but how do I use the data? So long story short, because I don't want to go too much into the details on it, because I don't really want to reveal my source code, but the gist of it is I was vastly overstating the importance of urbanicity, which, because of the results here, was basically skewing everything to the Republicans because they're dominating rural and urban areas. Sorry, suburban areas this election. Dominate, a bit of a strong word. They're doing good in suburban areas, and they dominate the rural areas here. And since a lot of areas that were urban were classified incorrectly as either suburban or rural, it caused them to do much better than they should if I did a proper... if I did... if I was... lost my train of thought there. Oh, that's awkward. Urbanicity. What was I saying? Well, we'll just stop that point because I completely lost my train of thought mid-sentence there, so that's awkward. I guess I'm a Joe Bidening this one. So overall, not great. Not great there. Big error on my part. I shouldn't have had that issue, so basically wildly overstating it. And even if I was using correct districting, it would have overstated it, but it is what it is. Now, the other two big issues, I think I can show this one because I don't think this will really reveal anything of value to... no, I don't want to show the code on this one because I think it's too important, but the other really big issue, there's one tuning issue is how important I should consider historical data to contemporary data. I've shifted it a bit more to contemporary from historical, and that's one of the reasons why the result's a bit better. And this one versus that. And make no mistake, the seat projection here is still not great because I'm missing a bunch in New York, I'm missing a bunch in Florida, I'm missing a bunch in North Carolina, a bunch in Colorado. So I'm still getting a bunch of misses, but it's much better. And that most of the remaining misses here are related to districting, being incorrectly labeled or not very well done. This won't be a problem in 2024 because I can actually get the proper demographic profiles, so that's going to be a significantly smaller issue. I don't have to generate them myself. And next time there's redistricting in 2032, hopefully, I will have more resources so I can do a better estimate. It won't just be one guy in his computer. Hopefully I'll have employees or something. But anyways, the other big one, this is a big tuning issue. So a lot of polls in the US are just headline number polls. For example, Trafalgar, they will publish the national headline. That's not very useful because the way my model projects who's going to win seats is it has to look at demographic data. But if demographic data is from polls that are D-leaning and you have a bunch of polls that are R-leaning that are just national numbers, it's going to cause a very hard skew and make the Democrats look like they're going to landslide everything. That's sort of what was happening in my model. So I created a section of my code to try to to amend the demographic data to account for all polls. The problem here, and this is where the biggest bias came in, what ended up happening here was I wasn't really sure what data to go off of. Because the problem is, the way I would want to do this is to pick the source of data that has the most frequency. So the most polls use it, so I have the best average. That wasn't immediately clear to me which subsource of data to use. I ended up picking party affiliation for this projection, but this is really only made obvious after I have an election result to compare to. In the end, what I ended up comparing against caused it to significantly overstate the Republicans. So we note here I had 53.6 to 46.2 with my November 6th forecast. And when I changed what I was comparing it to party affiliation, that clamps it down to 51.2 to 47.9. Now you might be asking yourself at home, especially my critics, and by all means, I have no ill will to any of my critics. I might have been a bit snippy in comments or dismissive or whatever. I apologize. But a lot of you are right, and fair enough. My model wasn't perfect. Though, as I said here, there's a lot of reasons why that happened. And I don't think it's necessarily the raw model itself. It's mostly been tuning issues and district projections. But one of the big issues here, and why I made this mistake here in picking which data to compare to. And this is the big challenge with something like this. I saw a result that made sense to me, and I didn't question that result. That's why I ended up not picking party affiliation, even though that might make intuitive sense earlier. The result I was getting spit out here, right here, 53.6 to 46.2, based off of historical track records and what I had here and what I had there and blah, 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 blah. I was like, that makes sense. That's the problem. The result doesn't have to make sense. Elections don't fit nicely in things, and I made this. That was a big mistake. I didn't question the result of my model for tuning issues because the result made sense to me. Now, equally, if the result doesn't make sense, it doesn't mean you have to trust the model's result. But when it does make sense and hit your prior assumptions, you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. So I didn't fix biases because I didn't anticipate them because it made sense to me. Now, in hindsight, it should have been a red flag, and I'll get into that momentarily, but overall here, I'm not terribly disappointed. Like, again, we're talking, my popular vote was decent, and like I said to everybody, I'm better at popular vote, and I was pretty close to the Democrats as a plus or minus one, probably. And I was a bit off on the Republicans, but seats did pretty bad. Full stop. At this point, I'm almost 30 seats off in aggregate, but it's probably closer to 60 wrong calls. So we're talking 60 wrong calls. It's like maybe like an 80-85% hit rate, which 80-85% hit rate might sound decent, especially if you're not really familiar with this. But a lot of these seats are not challenging to call. Like, no one's going to be like, oh man, you're so good you called South Dakota. Well, anyone who's ever looked at an election in the U.S. could probably call South Dakota right now. Similarly, like, people aren't going to be like, oh man, you did it. You got California going super Democrat. Oh, well, shucks. Only some way we could have possibly predicted that. So, not great. But, not the worst. So, to summarize, is kind of the result here. I think 2024, this will be a lot better because I'll have made these aforesaid changes, and I will have a couple elections going forward to actually test these changes. So it's not like we're just going to blindly plug this into 2024 in 2 years and be like, this is what we're going to get. No, we're going to have a couple elections in Canada to compare against, possibly UK, possibly Canadian national election. So there's going to be plenty of data points to compare against here before 2024, so I will have the ability to calibrate more. Calibration for this kind of thing is a moving target, because if it's not, the elections are complicated. So how should we interpret this election result? That's the big thing. So one of the big mistakes here in this election campaign, I should say, that I made, and I stand by this, by the way, is I focused too hard, per se, on the Democrats. Now, I actually fully stand by my position that the Democrats ran a bad campaign, and their over-focus on things like abortion and critical race theory and gender theory and stuff like that hurt them. You see here, that's a bit off-center. Oh, that didn't help. We're going to do this so you can actually see it. Okay. So we see here, we have about 50 million votes as counted-ish versus about 54 million votes. Okay. So we go back to 2020. Oh, it's 78 to 73. We go to 2018. It's 61. 2016, it's 62. You have to go all the way back to 2014 to get a worse Democrat midterm result, and you could argue that maybe 2014 should be a better representative, but it really shouldn't be, because a lot of states have introduced early voting, vote by mail, other schemes that increase voter turnout. So the Democrats shouldn't be being compared against something like 2014 or 2012. Not 2012, 2010. We shouldn't be comparing to those midterm elections, because it's so much easier to turn out voters now. And the Democrats, as proven here quite aptly, are really good at it. But wait, Bagel, you just said the Democrats did bad, but you just said they're really good at getting voter turnout. Yes. Because this is a terrible result. 50 million votes is bad. Where the Democrats are good at getting turnout is they're really good at getting people to vote who wouldn't otherwise have voted. Right? Okay. I'm just saying the same thing again, aren't I? But again, the important thing is that's only good in key districts. The Democrat turnout really works in, say, Philadelphia, New York City, Chicago, Detroit, a couple of these big core urban areas. They can really mobilize voters. But overall, their over-focus destroyed them in a lot of other areas. Florida, upstate New York, frankly, Arizona as a whole. They lost 2 seats there. Midwest, generally, they lost quite a bit of ground. Okay, they lost 28 million voters from 2020. Or if you even just compare to 2016, they've lost 11 million voters. So I don't think my analysis on the Democrats is wrong. They lost a lot of voters in a time period when voting is easier than ever. And I wouldn't even say that the campaigns that caused big turnout in 2016, 2018, 2020 are necessarily invalid to the motives that would have caused big turnout now, other than the Democrats hyper-focused on a few specific issues. Okay, so you might be asking yourselves, why didn't this turn into a big red wave instead of a bit of a... Could you even really call it a red anything? A red tickle? Well, that is where a bit of my blind side hit me, because I was focusing heavily on the Democrats doing a bad campaign. I didn't stop to consider the Republicans were also running a really bad campaign. So again, I just focused on the Democrats here. The Republicans got about 54 million votes, okay? 2020, they had 73 million votes. 2018, they had about 50 million votes. They had 63 in 2016, okay. That doesn't seem too bad. They did better than 2018. Right, but they should do better than 2018. 2018 was their midterm. You typically do worse in your own midterm than the other person's midterm. So gaining 2 million votes is actually kind of bad. You should expect to gain more than that. If we consider the Democrats as a baseline here, they gained 11 million more votes in 2018 than they did in 2022. So this is a very bad turnout result. Now, there's some accusations and there's some things going on. I know recently, I think it's the Attorney Governor's office in Arizona's filing, I don't know what this would be, complaint against Maricopa County about the voting machines not working on election day. I don't know what the results is going to be, and I don't want to speculate. That will resolve as that resolves. I don't know where the courts are going to go with that. So there is definitely at this point some people complaining that something improper possibly happened in some places, like Arizona. But I don't think that's maybe. But I think a lot of Republicans and a lot of possibly conservatives in other countries default to that being the issue, and they shouldn't. Because, yes, if there is something wrong with how Maricopa County did it, either just abject negligence or incompetence or whatever, that would be bad, yes. But that shouldn't cause the result to change, if not for the fact the Republicans were really bad at campaigning. And they're really bad at campaigning on two levels here. And if the Republicans want to win in 2024, they really need to address this. So the first level is they don't actually know what they're campaigning for. The Republican campaign was extremely disjointed, extremely unclear, covering a lot of different things. Different governors, different senators, different House candidates were all touching different notes. There wasn't cohesive national vision. There wasn't strict measured discipline. There wasn't anything. It was haphazard and confused. Okay. Why? That's a great question. There really shouldn't have been a reason why that was the case. And in a lot of regards, in this midterm, the Republicans campaigned with a really bad campaign strategy. A lot of the national campaign coverage, at least that I could see, maybe in some particular U.S. states it was different, because there's 50 of them, they can do a lot of targeting to different channels and stuff like that across states. But what I could see from my research and my perusing of media about the election, most of the campaign was focusing on Biden sucks. Okay. Yeah, saying Biden sucks is probably a good reason why the Democrat turnout was really bad. Like, really bad. Okay, I guess. But that's not how you get your own base turnout. There seems to be this issue in the Republican Party where a lot of the leadership and a lot of the people who have the ability to control money and spending are at war with its own base. You look at people like in Arizona, the Senate race there, you have Masters versus Kelly. Kelly outspent Masters nearly 9-1. Now, That shouldn't happen. Now, you could argue that Masters isn't actually that good of a politician because fundraising is part of the job of a politician. Okay. So part of it is Masters' fault. But when you're talking about the US, where the party as a whole, the party apparatus, doesn't control in any meaningful way who their candidates are because they're all picked by the grassroots, the reason why you have national fundraising efforts is to help individual candidates in key races who are not very good at fundraising. But how much money did the National Republican campaign spend in Arizona? Almost nothing. Okay. They didn't spend much in Georgia. They didn't spend much in Pennsylvania compared to their opponents. They got outspent in most of these key races. Why? Well, this is where the campaign messaging really fails them. How do you get people to donate money to you? Think about this for a second, right? You want someone to give you money. How do you do that? What motivates someone to give up their hard-earned cash? Can you think about it? In politics? Well, they have to feel like you are doing a good thing, that you are improving things. Picture normal charity. What makes someone donate to a charity? Well, they think that that charity is going to do a good thing and help people. Okay, makes sense, right? Why would people donate money to a politician instead of a charity? Because you only have so much money you can donate to any particular cause. Okay, so why would you donate to a politician? Well, you think that politician is going to do something you think is good. Makes sense, right? The problem here is, for the most part, the Republicans nationally were not very clear on what they're actually going to do. They made a lot of effort or a lot of noise about how the Democrats have caused inflation, how they've made the economy worse, they've caused fuel prices to go up, blah, 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 blah. And you know what? A lot of these things are true. The problem is, just because something's true doesn't mean it motivates people to give you money. And one of the key ways you win elections, is not the only way, but it is important, is you have money to spend it. When you have a case such as Arizona, because this is the most egregious one, and got spent 9-1, voters who don't have an opinion are going to be blasted by Kelly saying Masters is bad for whatever reason. And Masters can't counter message. He can't counter that. Money does matter in politics. Possibly I should consider money in my model, but I don't really think it's that important in regards to actually modeling correct results. But that's another topic for another story, or for another day. But the failure to have a message that is aspirational, that people, you're not just saying they suck, that we're going to do this. We're going to make society better by doing this. We're going to help people. We're going to save people. We're going to make people's lives better. The lack of those messages as a cohesive national picture was one of the reasons the Republicans did not materialize a wave here. This is the first big reason. The second big reason here that no meaningful wave materialized is in a lot of these key states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Colorado, I suppose, Nevada, Arizona, etc. And more states too, but these core states. These core states all allow a lot of mail-in voting. They're very permissive on ballot harvesting laws. And a lot of people in these states vote by mail. I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty sure like 70% of Arizona voted by mail. Something like that. So when you're talking about this level of voting, what does this allow? Now, I'll be honest here. I think vote by mail is a terrible thing. It completely violates the core precepts of secret ballot. Arguably, I think, yes, technically the concerns that it does make fraud more possible are true, but that's not my opposition to it. Because if you have the proper voter ID requirements and you have proper stuff, you can make vote by mail relatively secure. It will never be as secure as pen and paper ballot at the precinct, but you can make it fairly secure. Okay. My big issue with mail-in voting is you lose secret ballots and you allow people who wouldn't vote, who don't have an opinion, to be coerced into voting by being badgered, browbeat, whatever, which is part of the reason why secret ballots were created, so people couldn't be browbeat or badgered into voting a certain way. But as much as I don't like mail-in voting, the fact that mail-in voting is the rule of the land in the US, in a lot of these key states, means that the Republicans have to engage with it. You might think mail-in voting, like myself, is terrible. You might be one of those people who really think it causes fraud. Okay, great. You're not going to win by not playing the game. If you're playing soccer and they decided to introduce the offside rule back in, like the 80s or whatever, they did it, but you still play like there isn't an offside rule, you're going to be offside all the time and lose. You got to change to the rule of the game. The rules of the game in places like Arizona, places like California, etc. Vote by mail is the norm. Ballot harvesting is extremely permissive. So to win an election, you have to do that. If the Republicans want to win 2024, they need to have activists, they need to have campaign members going door to door in Republican areas and collecting mail-in ballots and hand delivering them. If you don't trust the mail system, don't do it. Just hand deliver them. There's no reason not to do this. Because the thing is, what you're trying to do here with these campaigns and what the Democrats have mastered is they go to low propensity voters who probably won't vote, but you go to their house, you go to their door, you talk to them about how, it's so important you vote, you really need to vote, it's so easy, your ballot's right there, just fill out your ballot for me, we really want Fetterman to win this race, he's going to be so good for Pennsylvania, just fill out your ballot please, you can give it to me and I can handle the rest. Great. They fill out their ballot, they pass it to you, they never think about it again. In a normal election without mail-in voting, that voter never would have voted. They don't care enough to go to a precinct to vote. But they care enough that if you are right there and you do 80% of the effort of voting, and all you need from them is to sign a ballot, photocopy pieces of ID, if you even have ID laws, and then give it to them, well, there you go. You did it. You got that person's vote. That's how you win an election in a lot of these states right now. I think it's extremely toxic for political discourse, and it'll probably be really bad for the U.S. as a whole once the Republicans finally realize that that is how you win elections. You have to ballot harvest. But that's the rules. You don't change the rules by not playing the game. You have to play the game, win, to change that rule. And that's really where the Republicans, that's the second big thing they completely failed at here. And a lot of people in right-wing circles that I'm seeing right now, they're screaming fraud. There's some people are blaming Trump. That's just dumb. It's hot air. It's stupid. Yes, maybe Arizona's attorney general's right and there was fraud in Maricopa County, or the election board wasn't negligent, or whatever their claim. We're not 100% certain the case there. But that's just Arizona. That's not why the Republicans lost Senate and gubernatorial race in Pennsylvania. That's not why they lost the Senate in New Hampshire. That's not why they lost the governor race in Michigan. That's not why they lost the Senate seat in Nevada. It's not why they lost those districts. It's definitely not why they lost the Senate seat in Colorado. They definitely lost the Senate seat in Colorado because the senator in Colorado decided to just give the middle finger to Trump, and you know what, the MAGA base is 30 to 40% of the Republican Party, so good luck winning when you piss off a very significant portion of your base. It's dumb. Lee Zeldin in New York proved that you don't have to run away from Trump as Republican to be very competitive. He came within 5% of winning in New York. Andrew Cuomo won by 30% in 2018, so be within 5%. That's a really good performance in New York. And he carried 4 congressional representatives across the line, probably. So the Republicans, a lot of the time, some of them are waking up to this and realizing this now, but a lot of them completely misread this, misreading this election. Now, I've seen some good ideas circling around, and some apparently Republicans in California are going to start putting ballot drop-off boxes at churches, for example. That's a great idea. Play the game. And then once you have power, fix the rules. Now, naturally, this is a democracy and an elective or representative country. So what's going to happen is the Republicans will adapt and start playing by the rules, and then they won't change the rules, and then, well, we're stuck with that. That's how people have, for example, people who really don't like first past the post. That's why first past the post stays around, because people who win using first past the post have figured out how to win using first past the post. They have no reason to change first past the post. You might like different systems. You might like first past the post, but that's why it stays, because people who win are the people who control it. So, in a lot of senses, unless we actually get some selfless people who care more about what is healthy for American democracy and less what is politically expedient, we're very likely going to be in a situation where the rules of the game are door-to-door, going to people who probably will never vote if it wasn't for the fact that you are hand-delivering their ballot. Like, they won't even deliver their own ballot to the mailbox level of they won't vote. Now, you could argue, well, why shouldn't they be able to vote? They're still a citizen. They still pay taxes. First off, I don't really buy that. I think voting is so important, there has to be some modicum of effort involved in it. If you do not have the effort to wait in a line to vote, maybe you shouldn't vote. Now, I'm perfectly sympathetic to the idea that in a lot of U.S. states, there's not enough precincts, not enough polling stations, not enough polling workers. That 100%, I'm sympathetic that's a problem. The solution, though, is to have more of those, not to create a system that violates the core precepts of secret ballots and allows people who don't have a single ounce of effort in their body to vote. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's democratic. It's the rules, though. It's not cheating to play by the rules. The rules might not be fair, but the rules are the rules. That's why the Republicans failed to have a red wave here. They didn't play to the rules. They played to the rules of 2014, 2010, not the rules of 2022. And they ran a really bad campaign, to be honest. Now, the way I do this is I based my analysis and my discussion of what's going on is informed by my model, which is kind of a self-filling loop in this particular election because my model was slightly skewed Republican because of the previously said tuning changes, so I didn't really look into it. So I wasn't really paying much attention to what the Republicans are doing wrong because my model was saying they were winning. So it's like, I mean, they suck, but I guess the situation's so bad, it doesn't matter if their campaign sucks. Should have been a red flag there. Should have been like, their campaign really sucks. Maybe my model is tuned wrong. Well, that's a lesson for me. In the future, I will try to keep that in mind. I can't promise that I will never make that mistake again because elections are moving targets. Sorry about that. Again, I apologize to people I was a bit dismissive to or I rejected their criticism. I tried to listen to the criticism, but I'm sure there might be one or two who I was a bit dismissive about. Apologies. It's very easy when you're doing something like this to fall into your own hubris, and I wouldn't say I completely fell into my own hubris, but I should have listened to some of the criticism a bit more poignantly, but it is what it is. So, just to summarize this, the Republicans won the House, so you can't not call this some level of something. I'm more apt to say that this was just a blue crash than a red wave. Because again, we go back here, 54 million votes. We go back all the way to 2016, 63. So we're only talking about 9 million more votes to a presidential race. Okay. 2014, they did better than 2014, I guess. Technically, they did better than 2010. Okay. They did about as good as 2012. So, the Republicans basically did, quote-unquote, normal. And what really changed here is the Democrats did bad for what Democrats normally do. Or what you should expect Democrats to do because they have mastered this new rules of the road for voting. They've really adapted to not having an offside rule. I guess it's a better way to say it than adapting to the offside rule. But anyways. So going forward, this will continue verbatim until Republicans smarten up and play by the rules, play to the rules to the T, and run better campaigns. They didn't learn a single thing from 2016 where Trump ran an aspirational campaign. You might have disliked his campaign, but he did have aspirational goals. 2022? What were they running on? Biden sucked? That's not aspirational. But I'm not repeating myself. So, with that, I bid you all adieu, and I apologize for the video being a bit late, but whatever. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep up weekly videos right now. It depends on case-by-case basis if I have projects done in time, because I don't have many elections to cover, so I'm looking at more scripted videos, which require more prep time. And not even just prep time in, like, hours worked, but more prep time, like, if you're trying to come up with a script, you have to, like, sit down and think about something, and you don't always have any productive time, like, productive progress made. But if you like this video, by all means, like, share, subscribe. Comment below if you think my projection was that bad, if you think my explanation here stupid, if you think I'm, I don't know, smelly. Let me know below. Otherwise, I will see you next time. And with that, I bid you adieu.